it is perfectly okay to be angry. It's perfectly okay to be upset and frustrated. That these emotions are here to teach us how to work with them. They are not the enemy.
Welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast, where we talk about everything from spirituality, self-development, relationships, mindfulness, wellness, and everything that will help you embrace all that you are so you can expand into the best version of yourself. All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. So the guest on today's episode is a man who has walked many different paths, from the DJ and club scene to becoming a music producer, student of the plants, flow state mentor, and breathwork facilitator. He travels the world holding space for others, helping them to face their fears and overcome life's challenges. It's a pleasure to introduce you to Mike Gazzo. Mike, welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast.
Happy to be here, brother. Very happy.
Greatly appreciate your time. Greatly appreciate you having space here. And for those of the listeners that aren't familiar with you, why don't you just go ahead and take a few moments to tell us about yourself and tell us about kind of how you got here.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Loaded question, huh? It sounds, it's funny. I ask people that every time I'm in a new music session, I'm like, tell me about yourself. And they're just like, if they don't go to the default of the music stuff that they've done, they're just like, no one really asked me that. But anyway, so, my journey's been an interesting one. Growing up in New Jersey, predominantly Christian, Catholic, upbringing, music was something that I think at an early age, like 3 years old, I was gravitated towards it. I mean, I would set up pots and pans around my Nana's house and like play fake drums with like wooden spoons. And, but throughout my life, like, I guess that urge never went away. And I just kept, opening up my musical influences, or rather like outlets, that started with like, orchestra and jazz band and all like the school functions, and then started creating bands outside of school. And it took over my life, in a beautiful way, growing up in New Jersey, not a lot of people go after music. Most of the people that are, at least a lot of people go after it, but most people are, usually playing local venues. And I started, after kind of opening up more of my electronic side in college, I started playing shows around the country and then around the world. And it was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like there's something here. There's an opportunity here. So I remember, I'll never forget this day. I reached out to my dad, who was like the gatekeeper of knowledge, or I guess the gatekeeper of education. He was a young parent, so he wanted me to like finish school. And like, so I was like, junior year, I was like, Dad, like I'll put together a contract if it makes you feel better, but this is an opportunity. I have to take it. Like, I don't want to look back when I'm 45 and regret not taking taking this opportunity. So he understood. He was always very supportive, and my mom was super supportive. My whole family was super supportive of me. So that led me on a 7-year journey in the music industry. It wasn't easy. I started from the bottom, literally like, DJing for bar tabs, like some shows losing money, and, but building, and then finally signing my first record deal with a major label. And, life was crazy, man. It was like, I was 23, 24 years old, signing to a major label, 25, moving out to LA. I was like, this is it. I'm making it. That's it. I'm going to be so wealthy and I'm going to be a celebrity, even though those weren't even the reasons I got into music in the first place. The first and foremost, I just loved it. It was a passion, and it helped me cope with what was going on in my life. It was kind of like my crutch, without realizing it was my crutch. So, over-identified in being in the music industry for many, many years, I was, unfortunately squeezed out through the industry, and the industry of anything. It's not just the music industry. You spend a lot of time in any industry on just the like more rigid corporate structural side. It's bound to catch up to you. We're not meant to be living only in that way, only in the masculine. So, failed relationship after failed relationship, all these accolades and success that I was feeling were not filling my cup up. And I was a huge partier. I mean, since I was 13, I was like, I'm the guy who, is running around the party super drunk, like handing out shots. That was always my persona. And for many years, that's the persona. I was the partier. I was the socialite. I was, the guy with the crazy stories. And identifying in that for so long, it was deteriorating my health. I wasn't sleeping really well. I transitioned from an artist to a music producer at some point, and that was a big transition for me, because you go from like upfront fees, where you're getting paid for the show. You go play the show, you get paid usually before, or at least a deposit, to like back end royalties that take months to be paid out, some fees that don't come in for like 5 months, 6 months after the song's released. Like the music industry in that way, there's a lag. So it was a scary jump, but when I jumped, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm behind the scenes. I'm not going crazy partying. Like, this is it. Maybe this is what's going to make me happy. And of course, lo and behold, it was not. It helped. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, not going out and touring helped. Like, but I still was social, just because I was a music producer didn't mean like I didn't still go out like a few times a week at least. And, years kept going on. I was 27, 28. Or I was actually 28. And I had always been interested in like Eastern perspective and philosophy, Greek philosophy, ethics and logic were some of my favorite courses of college, even though I didn't finish. Those were like my two favorite courses. And, but it was always intellectualized. So I did some Reiki sessions here and there, like with some Reiki practitioners, and, I'd go in, I'd get my like spiritual fix, and then I'd leave, I'd be like, oh, I feel amazing. And then like go back to the bullshit. And, needless to say, I recycled that cycle. When I was 28, I had a breakup happen that was like a really big breakup, in the sense that it was like a culmination of years of never dealing with any breakup. Never dealing with friends passing away. I would cry, but like most of the time I'd feel the emotion was when I was super drunk at the end of the night. Like it was never healthy, rarely healthy. And either I wouldn't talk about it because I'd try to suppress it, or I'd talk about it entirely too much to, get attention. It was never a healthy processing. So, that led me to, I had a friend, well, at the time he was like a random human, but, he was subletting a room in the place that I lived in Hollywood. And I hear a knock on the door, and it's Marco. And I open the door, and this man is glowing. I was like, his eyes were like full of life, and he was full of spirit. And I was like, what are you on? Like not in a bad way. Like, where do I get whatever you're on? And he was like, I'm on Vipassana. I'm on meditation. And I had started coincidentally to meditate at that time, like Headspace, nothing crazy. And, but I was like, damn, like, what is it? And so he explained it, silence. And for him, it was 7 days in Thailand. Most of the other ones that are more of coming from the Goenka side are 10 days to learn the meditation practice. So, couple of fears come up. I'm like, I want to go at first. And then of course I'm like, I don't know, maybe, I'm looking at the schedule one night. This is where alcohol came in, that I will respect it. And what it was able to give me was, it gave me the liquid courage to book a trip to Hong Kong by myself and book a Vipassana. And I did it that night, and I didn't cancel it or anything. I'm not usually someone to cancel that type of stuff. But that little bit of liquid courage plus the curiosity of like, wow, I should try this out, led me to Hong Kong in September of 2018. And before then, I did a solo trip around Asia, just like, I met up with some friends at some points, but like traveled alone. It was my first time like doing it proper. And so I went on Vipassana, and it was mind blowing, man. Like being silent was the easiest part. Sitting for hours on end physically was impossibly difficult, and dealing with my mind, like where my mind was going then, even now it's still a monkey mind, but then it was like, oh man, like, so I explored it for 10 days and it opened up my eyes to a depth that I did not know was possible. I dealt with a lot of grief I was carrying and some weight I was carrying, but I recycled the cycle, which means I went to Vipassana, I came back, I held the vibration for, a while. The first time was like 6 months because I think it was just it like penetrated me in such a deep way that I hadn't been doing anything up until that point, For most people, it's like the spiritual awakening, like, whoa, this is crazy. It lasts like a lot longer than like the next rebirths that happen, So I was like riding the high for 6 months. I was Vipassana's spokesperson for unofficially, telling everyone, you gotta go. And, so anyway, but I struggled to integrate and I went right back to the same habits and I went back to Vipassana and I'd get my meditation fix and I'd go back and I'd fail at creating a daily practice and I'd hang out with the same people, talking about the same shit. And like, there was a change inside, but it wasn't like, I didn't understand that change also can reflect your environment, but it's a choice. It's all choice in this universe. You have to choose. Autonomy and free will, whatever you want to call it, even with the divine plan, is a part of this human experience. So, I did that for like a few years until the pandemic hit. And I had opened up my perspective to try out some psychedelic medicines, specifically psilocybin. I had steered clear of them for the most part. I was more of a party drug guy, years of abusing other drugs to keep up, at night or to like enhance an experience. But I was aversive to it, and I'm really glad I was, because if I had opened it up before, I'd be like countless people I help now, reframing and reprogramming their bad trip or whatever the hell happens, So I started later. And I think the first time I sat was late 2019, not in a ceremony, just socially with two friends in Joshua Tree. It was actually pretty ceremonial for what it was. We set up a playlist and, but we were drinking beers. It was like super broy. And that led me on when the pandemic hit, everything slowed down and so did my life. And I had no excuse. I didn't have an excuse at the time. Excuse to go out and like be social, like obviously to distract myself. At the same time, I was in a bet to be like get in the best shape I possibly could with some colleagues, like some friends rather, and people I actually worked with in the music industry. I opened up my world to psychedelics or the world was opened up to me. And after that first, experience with it, I was like, whoa, this is beautiful. So when the pandemic hit, the world slowed down and I had a lot of free time. I didn't do what everybody else did in the music industry, was scramble and try to do a bunch of Zoom sessions. I never liked Zoom sessions, although I'm much more open to them now. At the time, I was like, I'm going to take this time to just focus on myself. So for about 9 months, I randomly dosed myself. I'd love to say it was a microdosing protocol, and I was microdosing for the most part, but it was chocolates. I was taking anywhere from, 0.12 all the way up to 3.5. So it was not, some days were more than others. And I had the freedom to explore, and it really helped me gain a perspective on presence that I think I had opened up in Vipassana, but had kept like thinking it was like I needed to go get my fix in order to like align with it. So, in that 9-month period of pretty much every day, again, I wasn't on a protocol. I was just every day, just popping mushrooms. During that time, I rebuilt my spiritual practice from 0 to like 20 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day. And in the middle of one night, I get this like urge, wake up at 3:30 in the morning and I get this urge to Google ayahuasca. And I was like, what? I knew what ayahuasca was. I had actually, the most LA quintessential thing, a year and a half prior, had been invited to like a sit at Sean Penn's house. And I was like, what? Like super random LA, ridiculous thing. And of course, I was like, should I go for the story? But then, thankfully I didn't go. Because when I was able to finally get to a place where I wanted to go down to Peru, I, sat with Shipipo lineage shamans and sat with that, sat with Rape, sat with Combo, and sat with Bufo, all within the same week. And all of the work I had been put in, that I put in for 2 years trying to maintain a certain perspective, changed in the matter of really one ceremony specifically. So anyway, I wanted to give most of the information on the front end because I think that's what people will resonate more with. But to kind of fast forward through the last several years, going and sitting with ayahuasca opened up every single modality possible. I started to not only read my own, but also get read my Akashic records, got really into certain energy clearing modalities that I got certified in, like Theta. It led me down a deep breathwork journey, which has been one of the more transformative tools as far as my relationship goes to it. And I know you resonate deeply with that too. And, I started with Wim Hof and I was like, quintessential 3-round, 5-round, trying to get my breath hold long. And then I went up to 12 rounds and I just lost track of time, it didn't matter how long I was not breathing or breathing, and I knew there was more. So it opened up all these different depths inside of me and it allowed an avenue. Grandmother allowed an avenue not only to other beautiful plant medicines, but also the journey of learning how to hold space for other people. First and foremost for myself, I had to hold space for myself and my inner child. And, sitting with all of the stuck emotions and allowing them to just permeate, I call it conscious falling apart. Like I have consciously fell apart more in the last 2 years than I have in my entire life. And there's a difference between falling apart and consciously falling apart. When you choose to allow yourself to just let go and have a blah moment or a blah year even, it's like, but the idea is through this exploration, I've come to realize that regardless of either extreme of incredible discomfort or overly pleasurable comfort, neither are really the game. It's the middle, and the dancing and the equanimity and the dancing in that space is the piece. So, not getting attached to either experience has helped me navigate like the many initiations that have come through, not only as a result of taking responsibility for myself, but taking responsibility for the men and the women in my family and all of the stuff that I've adopted through my lineage, extended through the network of people in the community that we serve, both my fiance and I. And, then also the initiation of now, newly on the verge of being a father. We're pregnant and expecting in September, and the portal of what that's been has been ridiculously deep. And also I just came home from a 2-week diet with some beautiful plants and working with grandmother a few more, 6 more times. And it was huge, it's such a huge mental checkpoint. Eileen and I started a company called On Earth together, at the most perfect time for us, not only in supporting each other, but supporting a community that was growing and is still growing through breath work, through holding space with certain ceremonies, and introducing people, but more importantly, empowering people. Because, actually, it's a really funny thing, but my favorite, if there's ever a favorite reflection that I have from the workshops that we host, it's not that people come back. It's not that they had a life-altering, experience. It's actually that they met somebody that changed their life. And they went off and did their thing, so many people have met each other and run off and done their own, created their own path. And it's a reminder that we can't do this alone. We need each other in certain ways, not codependent ways, but in a way that is healthy. And so like I said, my favorite moments in all of what we've been doing is hearing stories like that. And, so a lot of people feel super alone in this day and age, even though we're super connected with technology. I mean, the human connection, heart to heart, has definitely suffered. So to hear people reconnecting in that way and simultaneously reconnecting with themselves has been beautiful, really beautiful. And as you know, as a facilitator, every moment I hold space, I learn, I grow, I heal. So there's been huge transformative, amazing things that have come from just holding space one-on-one with people in either coaching containers that are longer, one-off breathwork sessions, or just listening, So yeah, that's like as best of a long Spark Note version, but is the story. And I'm still doing music, still a music producer. So I don't consider them separate halves or separate compartments anymore. Everything is under the compartment of God and spirituality at this point. Everything has a spiritual context. Everything has a deeper meaning. And I think there's a deeper depth that you can work in any relations with anything in this world. So my focus now has been just integrating all of what I've learned through the exploration within and holding space for others in all the compartments, relations in my life. Family's some of the hardest, friends are some of the hardest compartments, and even work. But at the end of the day, that's like, to me, it's all connected, So yeah, that's me.
It's beautiful, Mike. And being able to hear the story in more depth than what I previously knew, it's so fascinating that you were able to recognize that distinction of everything is divine timing, and even your timing in which coming into the interaction with these sacred plant medicines came at just the right time after you had already done that work to uncover that spiritual self, to really tap into that part of you that was going to allow that door to not just open a crack, but get flung wide open and show you kind of the path that, in my opinion, at least from my experience, it shows you that path that you're meant to be on. It gives you that glimpse of who you can be if you choose to walk that path. But it's just like you touched on, we have that choice. We can choose to come back and not walk that path, not integrate the things that we learned. And like you said, continue to recycle that pattern and keep going down the avenues that we know are comfortable, that we know what to expect, instead of saying, okay, I recognize that my path is to actually be in service to the greater good. How can I do that? And what does that look like? And it's been beautiful to, in the short time period that you and I have known each other, and we first got introduced through breathwork. You were one of my beginning sessions as I was getting my certification at the beginning of 2022. And so it was beautiful to be able to hold space for you. But at the same time, I'll admit I was super nervous because I knew you were a facilitator yourself, and I knew that you already were on this path and already on this journey. So it's like, okay, I am actually holding space for somebody who, if I don't do something right, like, they're going to totally let me know. But it was also beautiful because you knew how to go in deep. You knew how to receive the gift that I was trying to offer. And in doing so, you opened me up to recognizing the power that this modality has, and to also recognize that it isn't about the facilitator. It's actually more about the person going through the session.
Yeah, exactly. And first off, I didn't feel any level of nerves on your side. So you hit it well.
Thank you.
I agree. Like, I think in the beginning of me facilitating pretty much every single modality, I put a lot of emphasis on whether or not I do things correctly. And every single practitioner, every single certification I've ever been a part of has said the same thing, like, find your way. Your way is going to be the way that resonates with you and with others. And if it doesn't resonate with you, it's certainly not going to resonate with others. So, the idea of right or wrong, of course, there are certain things that are helpful, tools that are helpful, frameworks that are helpful. But the more I got into the breath, and holding space, the more I just trusted in the breath, trusted in the practice, and, trusted that whomever was being guided toward me to be held in this sacred container would show up and put in the effort that they could, regardless if they went deep, regardless if they had some cathartic experience. Like, they're going to get what they need, even if it's just a glimpse of peace, a glimpse of, ooh, wow, I'd never felt that sensation in my knee before, it's just all of it's opening at the most perfect divine time. And, you know, I was actually talking to a buddy of mine this morning about it. Like, you know, one of the things that I think is an edge for most practitioners or anyone on a spiritual path that has like kind of rededicated their life to figuring out or aligning with more inner peace, you know, whatever that looks like. It's hard. An edge is like people you love and wanting to just be like, just trust me, you know, just do this work. Like, I promise. And like, you know, I was talking to him about it, and I used to be like that when I got back from Vipassana. I was like, everybody needs to do Vipassana. You're fucking crazy if you're not meditating. Like, it was so, and it came from an honest place. Like, I really just wanted to help. But I've noticed that every single person I've actually been able to, every person that I have wanted to step into themselves, not into a specific path, but just into themselves. The only time that happened is when I completely backed off, when I completely let the natural way happen for them, their path unfold, and just live so deeply in my own and just like continue doing what I'm doing because I know that it's helping me and because I know that it's helping my relations and just being that walking example instead of being like, oh, you need to do this because of X, Y, Z, because of, you know, this benefit and that benefit. Like, we're ultra conditioned from the Western world to be like, well, you should do breathwork because A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like, of course, those are things, but you and I both know you're not going to hit every one of them most of the time. You might hit a few, but the beauty of it is connecting with yourself. That's it. At the end of the day, connecting with your heart. So yeah, man, I appreciate that, the transparency too. And it was an honor to be held in that way too. Like, you know, I've noticed that going into any work, like when there are other facilitators, there's a little bit of fear that comes up, you know, you're like, oh, these people know what they're doing. If they know that I don't know what I'm doing, it's all over. You know what I mean? It's just the mind, like it's the mind. But those moments have allowed me to tenderize into the moment and hear those people like, I had such a beautiful experience. The space was really held well and blah, 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 you know? Then when I sit with like you in that moment, I don't pass judgment. I'm just like, I'm there and I'm like, you know, just focused on my own process instead of like judging the way something is, you know? So yeah, it was an honor to sit there. 'Cause I remember the first time I held space and I was nervous as hell. So, you know, I actually I can't recall whether or not I even knew if it was your first or like one of your first sessions. I don't remember if I even knew that. So all I'm saying is regardless if I did or not, it didn't make any difference. This container was beautiful. So
Appreciate that, brother. And
of course
it definitely is. I think one of the biggest things that I had a takeaway from that particular session, because I think that was probably, the fifth or sixth session that I had held. Yeah. I had done most of my practicum at that point in time, and then I was just reaching out to kind of whoever would be willing to do a session with me so I could keep putting in the reps, because it's just like building any practice. You need to continue to do it more and more and more to, like you said, start to find your way. And recognize that it isn't so much about the modality itself as it is about the person holding the space and offering their energy up to be able to utilize however it is. And the vulnerability that you were able to show within that session in tapping into your own emotions and tapping into your own body and also honoring your own process gave me the confidence to continue to go through that session and be able to show up the way that I was able to. And so it's good to hear that, you know, you didn't feel any of the nerves that I was feeling at the time, or at least I didn't allow them to transmit through the digital space that we were working with. But I really enjoyed the fact that you touched on the importance of integration and integrating things that we receive before jumping into the next thing. and recognizing that through integrating is really how we continue to move forward through our journey, and not necessarily about trying to tick something off of a box or reaching any final destination, but knowing that if we integrate, it's like putting one more stone in our path, then we can take one more step. And then as we integrate the next lesson, we can put another stone in our path. And then the next thing you know, you look back and you're like, holy shit, I've walked a really long ways and I'm so far past where I thought I could be because I've actually done that work and integrated the lessons that came to me in all of those sessions that I've done.
Yeah. Integration, regardless if you're sitting in meditation retreats, breath work, you have a daily practice of anything, you're going to church, you're sitting with a plant medicine, as deep or as surface as you go, it doesn't matter. The integration's 90% of it. Because life, first off, I always say life, and this is something that I've definitely heard before, so I won't coin it as mine. Life is the ceremony, the space that we are already living in, like all of its challenges, all of its shortcomings, all of its gifts, it's all set up for us to awaken. But, the world we live in currently, I think we'd probably have very different paths if we lived in rural Asia, where perhaps we lived in a community and people kept up with true tradition, not passed down because they're blindly just listening, but because they really believe in what's being passed down because the people are examples of it, A part of the dissonance growing up was there was always, whether it was within the walls of my own network of people, friends and family, whatever, or, extended with others, like there were a lot of people preaching and a lot of people not walking the path, They'll say, oh, you must do this, you must do that, but then they'd go and do the opposite, or they'd, only make it convenient for the way that they already operated, which is not the spiritual path. That's ignoring edges, that's bypassing, and it's bullshit. So I felt that early on in life. That's why I think I didn't, become a devout Christian or Catholic, because I saw so much dissonance. I never judged the religion, and I never even judged the people as much. It was more like I saw through it, And so, now coming full circle, like I see how important it is to see where in your life you can pay attention to more, where in your body you can pay attention to more, where in your heart and your emotions and even your mind you can pay attention to more, as to be as equally powerful, if not more powerful, than any crazy night of ceremony or crazy breath work. As you probably know yourself, like the work just continues to get more subtle. It doesn't get more explosive. It gets subtler and subtler, and you have to really pay attention, and you have to reflect on what messages are coming through, and you got to have a clean channel. And, what you eat, who you're around, all these qualities of your environment can play roles in that. But it's ultimately up to you and your decisions, not the macro ones, the micro ones. Every moment, every little decision is the sauce that creates the larger transformation. So, similar to your, idea of the paving the way of the path, if you're too ultra focused on like so far ahead, you're always going to have that either anxiety or you're going to have some type of icky feeling because you're like, well, I'm not there yet, so therefore I'm not whole. If you're just focused on, oh, there's another foot to put down. Okay, let me put this down. All right, I'm going to put this paver down. Oh, there's something in the way. I got to move it over. I got to feel it. I got to look at it. Okay, now I put the paver down. You're just ultra focused in presence, as every great teacher that walked this planet and any scripture has ever told us to be present with our heart and present with what's in front of us currently in our field. Integration's a lot easier. It's not easy, but it's a lot easier. And you don't get caught in escaping and bypassing stuff. I see it so often with people, and I was a product of this. So I'm not even saying that I did it any differently. But when I first really, really stepped into this world, after that week of work in Peru, and I took 6 months integrating. I didn't work with any other medicine. I worked with modalities to help me integrate. So during that time, like, it's super easy to get caught in the etherealness of this work, you know, spirit guides and the angels and the Akashic records and, you know, the Lumerians and the this and that, you know, the true hidden history and all the dimensions and the planes. And it's all great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I still geek over that shit all the time. But it's this very human experience that is the sauce. This is everything. It's our heart, and it is integrating all of our emotions, all of the stuff we've been through, all of our karma that's bubbling through and channeling through at moments. Can we stay and remain so present with every challenge as to not see it as a roadblock, but something that we can work with, that's a part of us, that's the part of the wholeness of us, not just the joy and the, like, you know, love and light side of it, because that's also a bypass. If you're not looking at your shadow, you're one dimensional, you know. It's important, especially because we are humans. And, you know, you want to get geeky. We're in the third dimension and we're in duality. And these are rules. These are things we must pay attention to. So to me, like, it's actually created through the full circledness of getting into, like, super ethereal land and, like, connecting with my spirit guides more deeply and identifying them. All great, amazing. Getting deeply into scriptures and perspectives and ancient mystic teachings, amazing. That's all still there. But the one thing that it's helped me do on a daily basis is love myself more, is not look in the mirror and see only the ickiness that I want to rid myself of or the qualities that I hate, to see my heart and to therefore see others in that same way, even when they aren't the greatest human beings, you know, maybe when they're super hurt and they're really from a hurt place hurting others, to see that in them. And, like, to me, that has been the biggest gift, to align so deeply with the love I have for, you know, my fiance, for my parents, for my environment, the food I eat, and our incoming, I'd say, baby boy, you know, to already feel the love and how a child that isn't even born yet is cracking my heart open. And that has been the biggest gift. So all the other stuff can be easy to get caught in. And I got a little caught in it for a while, but you integrate even that into the human experience. So integration is like the number one thing. Everybody is like ceremony, breathwork, this, you know, therapy, this, that. It's like, how much fucking, you know, colonized mind things can we stack into our life to get the perfect life? Like, it's bullshit. It's like the heart. So yeah, I deeply put so much emphasis on integration, partially because I failed to integrate so deeply. So there's compassion there for those that are struggling in the integration process.
There's so many good things that you touched on there. And I think one important thing that you noted was at how much many of us that find ourselves on the spiritual path, that discover all of these different modalities and these different thought processes, and, you know, just like you said, spirit guides and entities, and, you know, all of the different dimensions and levels of consciousness and all of the information that we have at our fingertips thanks to the internet, that it's easy to get lost in that and forget the whole reason our soul decided to come here was to have the human experience. And how easy it is to get lost in trying to chase these experiences of finding the light and going outside of our body and transcending this experience, when, again, the whole reason we came here was to be here, was to be in this body, was to experience what it is that the earthly plane has to offer us. If we were meant to constantly chase the light and we were meant to constantly have these out-of-body experiences, we wouldn't have chose to come here. We would have stayed in the other dimensions and continued to be light and continued to be able to do whatever it was that we wanted to do. But we didn't make that choice. We came here, and we came here for a reason.
Well, you know, I would even say as an additive to that beautiful perspective is, if it was our, you know, if it was in our divine plan to awaken in a way as to awaken millions at the same time, such as Moses, Jesus, Buddha, these incredible individuals. I think I probably, maybe this is probably a projection into myself. I probably wasn't going to be born in New Jersey. I probably would be born in Tibet or, somewhere where the foundation was already so deeply spiritual. So, but who knows? I always maintain not to build any global messiah complex for anybody, but any one of us could be one of those people that awakens in a way that, and we are already, without needing to follow in the footsteps of the greatest teachers of all time. All of us yearn to have the love and compassion that Jesus had, and to have the awareness and the non-attachment that Buddha had, the selflessness that Moses had, and I'm just naming people, but some of the greatest teachers that have walked as humans. But you're totally right. And some of those teachers never walked as humans, some of the more, fifth, sixth, seventh dimensional beings that have been around, but maybe haven't manifested as a human, but guided humans from a different perspective. Those are equally as important too, but we're human, and we're here, and we were born where we were, and we had our traumas in the way that we did. And we cannot escape karma. We can't escape what's here in us, even if we don't take into consideration past lives, just what's happened to us in this lifetime. That's it. And what happened to our parents and our parents' parents, and et cetera, that however many generations back. But I think it's super important. I feel like people, even when I was getting caught in the etherealness of everything, it was getting also caught in the ethereal experiences. It wasn't just external stimuli or scripture or reading certain perspectives. It was getting attached to communioning with angels in ceremony, oh, that's what this is about. It's about the light. It's about that space. And I think what becomes extremely paradoxical in this path is it's really both. It's both at the same time. It's both being human and being multidimensional. It's all of it. And again, as you know, as you just walk down the path, it becomes more and more subtly obvious that it's paradoxical. Oh, okay, both. It's always both. It's never this or that. It's both. And that's the idea that I think Buddha attempted to teach so many is don't get attached to either. It's all of it and none of it. But yeah, man, I mean, I've had the most incredible spiritual teachers and people I've looked up to. And I've been really grateful to have those people around me for however long they were. And every one of them, the advice is so simple and it's so fucking human. It's so just love more, let go. Super simple. Not communion with Thoth so that you can understand the knowledge of light traveling. It's never that. It's, okay, forgive that person, have compassion, find compassion in you. It's super simple. So, I think that's where I've been for the last year. And I think grounding into having a baby only made us more and more human, So.
It's beautiful. And I love how you've kind of made a point to talk about the subtlety of the journey several times. Yeah. And where I think that's really important is, and I know speaking from my own experience and my own journey of trying to chase that next biggest experience and going, okay, well, I had this amazing experience this one time. So now the next time it should be even bigger, right? But in fact, it's been completely the opposite. The more I dive in, the more I'm required to pay attention, to pay attention to the subtleties of what are trying to communicate. And it's almost like we all have to have those mind-blowing moments to blast that door open, to make us know that there is something greater than just what we can tangibly see in this physical existence. But to then come back and try and see the subtlety of that transcended experience in the minute flowers that are in the trail that we're walking down. Or like when we were chatting a little bit before we hit record, of the hawks you see flying in the area. And I'll even share just a little, there's a log that's in the woods here that is up a little ways from the river that runs through the woods. And it's kind of like my space that I go when I need just some time by myself to release some emotions and just shed from being in a session or a podcast recording and just kind of come back to center. And when I first started sitting there, I would close my eyes and just go within. And over the last couple of weeks, I've started to recognize that as I continually try to just go within, as I'm out in nature, I'm missing the point. And so I've now started sitting in meditation and observing the world around me. And I watched 4 turkey vultures flying through the sky and was able to recognize that they were flying in such a way that they were actually working together as a team. And they were each flying in independent oval patterns, slightly overlapping each other in their flight. And I recognized in that moment, holy shit, these guys are hunting together, scanning the forest as they fly along, not each one needing to scan that whole area himself, but just needing to scan a section. And then his buddy scans another section, and then his buddy scans another section. And those slight flight patterns overlapping each other allowed them to scan the entirety of the forest, not missing a single thing. And then the moment one would recognize, they all 4 flew down in that exact same spot. And it's like, that's what it means to be in community. That's what it means to co-regulate with people around you that may recognize and see something that you didn't, but then can bring that to your awareness.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I resonate with so much of what you just shared because, I went through a big stint of climbing a ton of mountains. And, I at the time, like, I'd go to the peak and I'd meditate. I'd close my eyes, but like, in that moment, I had less release. I had less awareness come through and channeling than when I was just walking through the wilderness without any music, not listening to anything, and just walking. And, to me, like, again, I think people can sometimes, when they're first getting introduced to meditation, be super, what's the right word? Intimidated, right? Like, oh man, I got to close my eyes and just sit there. But like, I always say to people, it's like, okay, what's your favorite thing to do? And like 9 times out of 10, it's, at least in my world, it's some musical instrument or it's some activity, right? So say it's tennis. All right. When you're playing tennis, do you know what time it is? Do you even know how much time has passed unless there's someone telling you? They're like, no. You sometimes play for hours and not even realize it's been hours. No, that's meditation, flow state. It's as easy as that. So all that, to me, meditation, when your one-pointedness is being brought to the inner world, right, versus something you're doing, the challenge is that the inner world can be rather complex. And our thoughts, untamed, create every fucking part of our experience. But when you're playing tennis, none of that happens. Why? Because you're one-pointed. So it's all of it. All of it is a meditation. It isn't just meditating, Like, that's what Vipassana teaches you, to be meditative in everything. I missed that. I went on 4 meditation retreats. I sat for 300 hours or 400 hours, right? And I constantly missed. It took up until this year to realize this, and it's still an integration that I'm working on. The meditation isn't just when you're in the hall. It's when you're walking. It's when you're eating. Can you remain that present when you're taking every fucking bite of the rice noodle and you're like so present with it. And I'm like, damn, like that level of presence is a due north for me, you know, and it isn't when it's, I think my due north isn't even being that present with pleasurable things or comfortable things, or it's not even with mundane things, right? Things that are not as exciting. It's with the discomfort. Can I remain grateful and present when I'm losing my shit? You know what I mean? When things are falling apart. And that was back to the, you know, what I was saying, the conscious falling apart. That's been like my practice for at least a year, you know, and there's been great, amazing spiritual advancements and quantum leaps. And to touch on momentarily, like the expectation that each time will be bigger. For a while it was. That's why I was like, oh man, what's the last one gonna be before I'm Jesus? You know what I mean? like what's the last thing? And this last, you know, diet, although I'm still processing a lot, so I can only really share a little bit. One of the moments that was probably single-handedly the most important mental, physical, spiritual, emotional checkpoint of my life. The way in which the actual experience itself is less important of what I was feeling and what was happening in my awareness, where my awareness was. That's actually less important. How I got there was more important. And how I got there was by just sitting and paying attention to an edge, to a discomfort, to something that was so discomforting. And, you know, it was by myself. I was, you know, meaning like I was outside of the ceremony space and I was in the bathroom. And, you know, things would come up around like guilt of not being in the room with everybody, you know, I got to be back in the room. And I just allowed myself to melt into the moment. And it was discomfort. And it wasn't that, it was much more than that. But like, that was one of the things that was coming up. Super subtle, right? Fucking the most subtle thing. Just stay in the bathroom, Mike. And guess what came through? All the moments that I was alone in the bathroom when I was a kid and blah, 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 right? And that feeling all that pain alone in that bathroom and aligning with that part of my inner child opened up a depth in me that I can't even begin to try to describe. I don't even know what the fuck happened, to be honest. It's hard to even articulate. But to your point, like, it wasn't through some explosive thing, you know? It wasn't the depth and the awareness of that depth wasn't through some, like exorcism, crazy, like release. It was like just through presence and like paying attention, you know, not considering, you feel guilty for being in the bathroom as less than spiritual or, you know, not what I'm there to work on. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like, it's just really it's like walking a tightrope and not getting like swayed to either side, and you're just walking it. And the wind will blow and you adjust, but you're staying, not to be rigid with it, but you understand what I'm saying. You know, you're staying in the middle and allowing the wind almost to balance you instead of knock you over. And that to me is the storms of life. You know, things will come through, you know, ecosystems will come through. You'll even have moments of pure sunshine. But if you get caught in the fact that the sun will always be there, you're going to be inviting suffering in, you know, because guess what? A cloud's fucking coming or the night's coming. Like, so, and the last thing I'll say, I know I'm touching on a lot here, but the last thing I'll say is, you know, the vultures you were speaking of. The hawks in the area. Something that actually literally just came through as you were sharing was I was just kind of sitting outside smoking a mapacho pipe, just sitting, you know, and there were hawks and the hawks were playing. They were playing with each other. These fucking crazy, vicious, you know, top of the food chain birds that are like incredible were just flying behind each other as a little pack, like almost running into each other. There was such a playfulness and they were just gliding through the wind. And it's like, it isn't just about what's inside. I think the natives and the indigenous of this world, specifically Native Americans and South American indigenous people, they know this. Nature is God. Nature is anything you need to learn. Look to nature. So I'm right there with you, man. It's part of the reason I want to like live more in the middle of nowhere. There's such a well of knowledge by just observing nature itself, just nature.
Yeah. And being able to see yourself within that nature and not separate from
not
it.
separate. We just said that. Jinx.
Well, as we're kind of nearing the hour, I think now is a perfect time to ask you the embrace and expand signature question of Mike.
Cool.
What did you have to embrace in your life in order to expand into the person you are today?
How much time you got? If I were to narrow it down, I'll tell you the thing I've had to embrace as of late. The thing that I've had to embrace the most is that it is perfectly okay to be angry. It's perfectly okay to be upset and frustrated. That these emotions are here to teach us how to work with them. They are not the enemy. And anything that we can do to notice where we're projecting, or notice where I'm projecting in my life, and project or mirror that back inside, has been one way. It's something I've had to integrate, because in this path, the love and light, the, living in the light mentality, the ethereal mentality, is that all that is icky. And it's, we easily identify it as an entity, separate from all of the rest of us, Oh, that person's judgmental. I can't believe how judgmental they are. Now, you're judging them for being judgmental. It's amazing how clear it becomes. So I realized that, like, if I can't accept that, like, shit that happened to me was difficult, and part of me is still coping with that and angry, and the triggers that come up that bring that anger out, if I can't just accept that about myself, I'm never going to be able to sit with other people that are dealing with their anger. I'm not even going to be able to hold space for them. I won't even have advice to give them. And at the very least, I will be continuing to enter the cycle of suffering by not just letting it happen, not unconsciously, like pulling at the thread and having compassion for myself when I inevitably do something, perhaps out of the normal character that I would, like raise my voice, like, I think it's super funny hearing stories about Maharaji and Ram Dass from back in the day.
Yeah.
Cause like Maharaji used to smack people up, you know what I mean? And, like as a deep believer that Maharaji was, cause I didn't experience him in person, that he was an enlightened individual. Like, you're like, what am I missing? What am I missing here? So it first is practice within yourself. And I think that's an amazing question, because to be honest with you, I think that when you're in expansion mode, especially the first big expansion, that spiritual awakening moment, that whatever that is, could be, 5 years old, could be, whenever, you get caught in the expansion, like loop, and you become extremely aversive to contraction, and every expansion has a contraction. That is how everything works. The more that you can embrace the contraction, the more you will expand. So to me, embracing my anger knowingly, like I know deep in my being that if I can just be with whatever's there, even if I don't love it about myself, something at an eventual point, things will change. And that level of depth within, just like roots of a tree, will allow me to climb higher and wider as to have a better perspective on my problem that I was so involved in, And I would say 11 times out of 10, my anger, my sadness, my frustration has absolutely nothing to do with the other person, has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening in my life, has absolutely, in the moment, has absolutely nothing to do with that. So you pull at a thread and man, the well is deep,
Yeah.
It's deep. So anger is a hard one. You know, it's masked sadness. It's a way to protect yourself against the hurt. So growing up with that for most of my childhood, and how people interact with each other, it's been a deep program to work with, and a deep, not just program, but emotion to work with. I think for most people, it's pretty sticky. But you know, I have an amazing partner that lets me throw little fucking tantrums. And, you know, I have friends that allow me to throw little tantrums, and they know it has nothing to do with them. And they let me fall apart, and they hold me. And that's where that, you know, vulture mentality, or, you know, pack mentality, tribe mentality, community mentality is so important. So I owe a lot of my growth to the community around me and the people that have helped me by holding me and seeing me for who I am, for what my heart really is. So, yeah.
Such a fantastic answer. And
Thanks.
It's so interesting at the different answers that continually come up for that question. And this is the first time somebody has mentioned that really embracing those darker aspects fully with compassion and love, and recognizing that they're just as much of a part of you as all of the light parts of you.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't live in just one small spectrum of it. We have to be able to live into that full array of everything that wants to come up, and tell ourselves that it's okay to feel that. We don't have to bottle it up. There's, of course, healthy ways to feel it and unhealthy ways to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is nice when you have those individuals in your life that allow you to get messy and to fuck up, and to maybe do stuff that you typically wouldn't do, but to recognize that, okay, I made a mistake. Now I can come back. I can see what that mistake was trying to teach me. And then I can move forward with that lesson in mind now. And maybe the next time that I get triggered in that same way, I have that lesson now to make a different decision off of.
Yep. And what better way can you think of to soften into fatherhood than that? You know, like allowing yourself to be held shows you what is possible from allowing yourself to be held, and also having people that will hold you and not judge you and not get caught in the story of it. And like, well, you said this to me. Like, no, you were angry because of something that has nothing to do with me. And that's groundedness. That's centeredness, you know? Just again, I've been bringing up all the great names throughout the podcast, but that's one of the most important teachings of Jesus, in my opinion, was how he didn't take on other people's anger in becoming angry. You know, he saw everybody from a place deep in the heart that he could see why they were so angry, and held compassion for them as to still not get angry or frustrated or triggered in those moments of him being stabbed and persecuted and judged and spit on. And like, if there's a place, again, as a state of being that consistently comes up as a due north, it's that level of inner peace. It's that level of inner peace. And he, you know, individuals like him didn't say, we aren't human, right? They said, we're just not the body. That's not all of who we are. We have a body. Okay. So you can't discard the body, you know, can't just let it die because you won't be here in this way. But we are not the body. So let me show you that we're not the body. Let me show you what you really are inside. So, you know, but the path to that for every one of those individuals was a numerous amount of spiritual practices, but they were also just human beings. You know, every one of them had a story of being a human being for a certain amount of time, getting angry, getting upset, you know, working hard, like Zen, chop wood, carry water, you know, they were just doing the human things, you know, carpenter, whatever it is. So it's like, yeah, man, it's like embracing all of it. You have to embrace both sides of it, the shadow and the light. It's imperative for all of us. You can't have compassion for the people who are operating from that darkness if you're not embracing your own. It's just not possible. It's fake compassion. It's not real compassion, you know?
And again, that's just another form of bypassing. It's bypassing the real truth of what it needs to. And I had saying come into my mind as you were speaking on that, of an encounter that Ram Dass had with Maharaji, and he told him to love everyone and speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That is the fundamental message. And Ram Dass looked back at him. He's like, I can't do that. I hate this person. Like, this person wronged me back then. How can I love that person? And he just kept telling him, Ram Dass, love everyone and speak the truth.
Yeah. He had no, I think it's so funny that like literally not a single bit of like ethereal, like, you know, multidimensional advice from Maharaji to any one of the people around him. And that's a great example. Like, it's super simple. It's really not that complicated. We've made it more complicated than it is. And it's paradoxical. How can I both love somebody and tell them the truth of the fact that they hurt me? But that's it right there. The courage to say, that hurt, you know, and let it go. I love you regardless. I know I love you, and I know that hurt, but the reason it hurt had nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a hard one to, when you blow it up to like the atrocities that have happened in the world, it's real hard to hold on to. It depends who you're talking to. You know, like if somebody's like, you know, not able to hold that perspective, and we talk about something like the Holocaust, like it's really difficult to hold that with something so fucking atrocious that has happened in our history. You know, but I think that it becomes something, I think, to utilize in your day-to-day life as to not get utterly attached to those who hurt you and practice the forgiveness. And I think that I would say pretty much every one of, you know, using the Holocaust as an example, right? Not to get crazy with it right now, but at the end of the podcast, but, you know, any of my friends that are Jewish, like their level of compassion and forgiveness regarding those atrocities shows how much it means to forgive and let go. And it's hard. It's really hard. I could not imagine to be in that position with ancestors that are treated in such a terrible way. But the story continues. There's so many of those examples around the world, and forgiveness is so utterly important, but it only happens if you start to forgive yourself. So whatever that comes up for you, you know, like whatever you need to forgive, it could be as small as like, I took the last piece of gum and, you know, my niece really wanted it. like really super small, you know, to some of the shit that isn't easy to look at, within yourself. So yeah.
It's interesting.
It's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, not to carry this on too much longer, but I think it's relevant that the biggest message I received in my very first ayahuasca ceremony was a long list of people I had to forgive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And literally she just kept on showing me the face of every single person. And I would just say, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And at the very end of that list was myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the hardest forgiveness to have to admit and to have to give back to myself. And I broke down in that moment of just recognizing that so many people that I pointed the finger at, there was 3 other fingers pointing back at myself. And I had to forgive that.
It starts and stops within yourself. And forgiveness isn't on an expectation that whom you're forgiving is forgivable, you know, or repenting or sorry. true forgiveness is a vibrational state of being and emotion, or a, I guess it would be more of like a directionalized emotion, because there's an action there, and that action is the letting go. And it's so hard. It's so hard. And I think for a lot of us that have, uncovered really sticky parts of our childhood and stuff that maybe perhaps we weren't even aware of, which I'm sure everyone on this path has like opened up a part of them that they were like, whoa, I didn't even know that happened. To forgive some of the individuals that were closest to you for essentially creating part of the environment of what your suffering is so deeply in this moment. That's hard, super hard. But then to forgive yourself for allowing it to happen, forgive yourself for perpetuating it, forgive yourself. I mean, there's so many depths of forgiveness. So I feel you, man. And that's so beautiful that, alongside all the people you were to forgive, you were really the most important, which was the last hurdle.
Yeah.
Was forgiving yourself. And, I always say this to every person on this path: if you figured it out, please call me. If you have one meditation and it all comes together, just write down a little note of like a couple little precepts that I need to follow. I'm sure they're going to be so similar to all the other ones. But please shoot me a voice note. Let me know what the secret is.
Same. If you know the answer, you know where to contact us at Embrace and Expand. And Mike, for all of the people out there that may have the answer to bring to you, or that maybe just loved what you had to say today and wanted to get in contact with you, or maybe wanted to experience one of your workshops, what's the best place to get a hold of you?
So the easiest is through my Instagram, all things Gazzo or Gazzo Music, either one that you can search. I answer every DM, have always answered every DM. So just shoot me a DM, even if it pops into the request. I check it all the time. Email mike@unearth.la, as well as our website, unearth.la. We have a bunch of different offerings there, both virtual and also like international that we're working on right now. So, and then our unearth.la, our unearth.la Instagram, which is at unearth.la. So any one of those, if anybody is interested in, anything in the medicine world, same thing. You can reach me through my email. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated every moment that we've dropped in. So
yeah, I greatly appreciate your time and bringing your wisdom and experience and just perspective to the podcast. I know being that I get to edit this podcast, I get to listen to it numerous times, and I always enjoy going back over it, because in trying to be present in the moment for the conversation, I do have a tendency to miss some of the things and some of the subtleties of what gets transpired through. So it's always a joy to kind of get to go back and listen to it 3 or 4 times to get to the final product. So thank you so much for everything that you had to share and for being here today, Mike.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, and thank you to each and every one that are listening to this episode, no matter what time or day it is. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you for being here. And thanks again for listening to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. I'll catch you on the next one.